Nier Automata critique. Now, before I get into this critique, I'd like to say that the first 40 hours of the game were quite fun. The combat felt smooth, with a dodge that feels as though I'm grunge-tang through a mass of Toho bullets and flailing robot arms. The damage values and stun values were a bit of an issue in the beginning, with how inconsistent the numbers could be, but I could still manage to pull off several very fun combos from the get-go. And the combo potential only increased as you leveled up weapons and got more plug-in chips. With that said, though, there were several issues to address. In order to do so, let's get into the nitty-gritty, shall we? The game begins with a tutorial that explains the basic mechanics, like light attacks, heavy attacks, jumping, shooting, dodging, and perfect dodging, and I won't go into those since it's already explained in the game. I will instead go into the mechanics that aren't explained. The combat goes as follows. You have fist weapons, spears, small weapons, and large weapons. Each weapon on your weapons menu indicates how many light and heavy attack animations are in a combo. As you level up your weapons, the combo gets longer and effects are added onto the weapon's attacks, with level 4 being the highest. You also have several other attack options the game does not tell you about, which is a bit of a shame since there are a lot of other attacks that you can do. You can do a launcher similar to Afterburner Kick from Bayonetta or Wonderful Rising in Platinum's really underrated game, Wonderful 101, by pressing your heavy attack button just after you jump. You can also have an attack where if you hold down the light or heavy attack, you get different moves depending on the weapon and if the weapon is set to light or heavy attack. There is also an attack that you can do, which is that after a successful perfect dodge, you have the option of doing a heavy attack, light attack, or shoot, all of which vary depending on what weapon is being used. You can also cancel every attack animation by jumping, dashing, or self-destruct / rage mode that allows you to create new combos. I would suggest putting self-destruct on one of the face buttons if you wish to do these cancels consistently. The self-destruct cancels in particular add strange effects to the animation, since you're canceling the animation completely, allowing you to do rather strange and unusual combos that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. Along with this, you have dash attacks, both in the air and on the ground, which are done by dodging and then pressing the light or heavy attack at the same time. You also have a taunt that you can perform by turning on and off your lights repeatedly, leaving your opponents in an enraged state. This means that they'll both do more damage to you, but you will also do more damage to them. You also have a gliding kick that, although inconsistent, will launch your opponent forward. You can do this by holding the jump button and then pressing your heavy attack button. The game also has a wall splat state, where if you launch them forward into the wall, they will then be stunned temporarily, allowing you to do more attacks on them as they fall. There's also another move that you can do where if you jump and then as soon as you start the jump, you then press the shoot button and the dodge button at the same time. You will then do a move that'll launch you forward. Now let's get into the chips. The only chips that I found honestly interesting in this game were the ones that didn't increase your passive skills. So the only ones that I found generally useful for combos were overclock, evasion system, bullet detonation, counter, and then probably either shockwave or continuous combo. The rest of them were just passive buffs, and ultimately they weren't very interesting since they only made it so that you can kill your enemies faster rather than keep your enemies in the air longer or increase stun. Okay, so let's go over all of them. Continuous combo allows you to continue combos while evading, so essentially it's like Bayonetta's offset, where you're doing a combo and then while you're doing the combo you then dash and then you continue the combo afterwards. It's not quite like Bayonetta's where you have to hold the button and then do the dash and then continue the combo. It's a bit simpler. It's a bit worse than it would be in Bayonetta, but it's still pretty useful in general. The next one is pretty self-explanatory. It's shockwave. It basically makes it so you have an added shockwave. This means you have more range on your attack, so it just means you're more likely to stun the enemy from farther away. Next up we have a counter, which is actually quite useful. Essentially what you want to do for a counter is simply push the directional stick to where the enemy's attack is coming from. So if he's right in front of you, just push up. What this allows you to do is simply have two launchers, because certain weapons when you do the counter attack allows you to push them up into the air, and so this doesn't waste your previous launcher since you're only allowed to do one in a combo. but with a counterattack or with a perfect dodge attack that launches an enemy up into the air, it means that you didn't use up your launcher, which you can then use afterwards, which is quite handy. The next thing that is up is the overclock chip. Now, overclock is actually quite interesting and essentially allows you to do a Bayonetta-esque time stop after a perfect dodge, which is actually quite useful for basically most combos, honestly. The thing about overclock is that it essentially lasts for a really long time, way longer than it would ever last in Bayonetta, so you can basically do a large amount of things within that time span. The last two chips I'd like to talk about are Evasive System and Bullet Detonation. Evasive System is a chip that allows you to slow down time when enemy projectiles are coming at you. It's quite helpful against bosses that use way too many projectiles. Bullet Detonation is a chip that allows you to strike enemy bullets and then have those said bullets explode on impact. It's quite useful, again, to use it against bosses who use way too many projectiles, and it's also just a nice effect to have on your sword. Combining these mechanics together lead to some really fun combos. Here are some examples. Okay, now that I've talked about the good, let's get into the bad, shall we? Now, before I make these claims, I'd like to say that I seriously enjoy the game, and another thing is that they did say this was going to be a less action-oriented game, but there are some issues I'd like to address since they already did so well in the game that it's just weird that they would leave some of this stuff out or not change it in general. The first thing I'd like to criticize is the leveling system. It should either be removed entirely or just changed so that the attack damage isn't dependent on what level you are. My beef with the leveling system is that you end up doing too much damage as you level up. A thing about a good action game, like Bayonetta or Wonderful 101, is that there's this nice sense of pacing with a fight where you start a combo and then either it's completed and you've killed the enemy or they've maneuvered and then you have to get them again. And it's the perfect balance between player action and the AI itself. It's also about pattern recognition and being able to take advantage of said patterns, along with game mastery, where after you practice throughout the whole game and you've done everything and gained all the powers, you can then toy around with said abilities. It's empowering because you have an excellent sense of control, and with a reward system like you would usually have in a platinum game, it's really rewarding to finally get that triple S rank or that platinum rank after so long of only getting A's or bronzes, along with allowing the players to express themselves in a sense with the game's mechanics, because, for example, if you like using the fist weapons in, say, Bayonetta, then you could really show your mastery with a creative combo that took hours of thinking about and testing and positioning, and then when you finally pull it off, it's just the most wonderful feeling in the whole universe, because you spent all that time trying to think about it and then testing it over and over and over again. There's a wonderful sense of empowerment. It all builds up to where there's a nice payoff, but as you get higher level in Nier Automata, you tend to lose that, where you become too powerful and just kill everything in one hit, thus making the game who can hit who first rather than pattern recognition. The leveling system doesn't even make sense thematically, because in the first Nier, the only two characters in the whole game that had a level were Nier Gestalt and Nier Replicant. Nier Gestalt had a level because it essentially showed you how quickly he increased in power after he made a contract with the book. Nier Replicant had a level because it shows you how far the characters come throughout the game. And by the end of it, Nier Replicant has become just as strong, or possibly stronger, than the Dark Lord / Nier Gestalt. Whereas in Nier Automata, this actually only brings up a problem, since it's not only narratively not useful, it also brings up a huge glaring issue in the story. Like, how is the amalgamation of alien evolution weaker than a tiny little robot that I found at the bottom of a basin? It's just confusing. Why would they do that? Why would they make him so much stronger? It just doesn't make any sense. The next issue I'd like to bring up are the characters. Now, A2 and 2B are just fine, but what in the world were they thinking with 9S? I mean, the game already has a problem with combos in general. The thing is that a game like Bayonetta, I believe, has about 38 combos? I could be wrong on that, but generally there's a general combo list, and then you have special combos for each weapon, whereas in Nier Automata there's only 2 combo strings. There's the light attack combo string and then the heavy attack combo string, and then you have a transition attack where if you're doing the light combo string and then press the heavy attack, you then transition into the heavy attack. So technically you only have 2 combos. I know quantitative data, like the amount of combos in a game, isn't exactly qualitative data, but when it comes to Platinum games, the more options you have, the more fun and creative you can get with a combo. So usually quantity doesn't beat quality, but in this case, having more quantity is better. And then 9S completely removes the heavy attack combo string, so essentially the whole game's balance is ruined whenever you play 9S, since you only have 1 combo string, you have a launcher, and then you have really crappy dash attacks. And what replaces the heavy attack string is just a hacking minigame. It's not fun. I mean, it's fun the first time you do it, but there are only a few variations with regular enemies, so it's not great. I mean, there are a few exceptions, like the arena boss fight and then some of the bosses, but generally the hacking minigame is not worth it, especially since the only thing you get after doing the hacking is you get a AoE attack that does damage. It doesn't even launch them up into the air or something interesting like that. It's just damage. It's really boring. And speaking of characters, I'm feeling rather mixed about A2. On one hand, you get a taunt, which is nice, but that's all it really is. Essentially, all it does is make the opponents more aggressive and you do more damage. It's not really... I mean, there's a idea of risk and reward, but that's essentially what all you should be doing, because there are chips in the game that increase your damage by like 180%, 200% after you do a taunt. So essentially you put the game on easy mode by just taunting the enemy, have those chips equipped, and then you can just kill everything in berserker mode. I don't think I actually like A2 that much after thinking about it. It's not... I mean, because that's the shame is that I really like her character design and her story, but like the fact that she's just an even easier character to play than 2B just kind of upsets me, actually. I mean, the only thing that's unique to her is her incredible dash. I actually quite like it. It's a lot of fun to mess around with, but everything else compared to 2B is just not as fun to play with. There's less game mechanics involved. It's just a bit upsetting that they would do this to this character. They would make her less fun to play in general than the first character you play, and then the second character you play is even worse than the third one, so I guess the theme is just play 2B if you want the most fun, and then A2 if you just want a really easy experience. It's just such a shame that it panned out that way. I mean, the differences between Bayonetta and Jean are even simpler than the differences between 2B, 9S, and A2, but her payoff is that she can do her offset infinitely, whereas Bayonetta can only do it about 3 times, I think, as well as do more damage with her weaves. And I think she also has she has the mechanic with her perfect parry, where she can't do witch time regularly when she dodges, but she gets a really long witch time, which is amazing. I really like playing John, but in Nier Automata, all the other characters suck, whereas at least in a game like Bayonetta, all of them are the only 2 that you can do are infinitely more interesting to play than anything offered in Nier Automata. I don't know, there should have been more character variety. Essentially, if 2B just had an extended dash, then she would be easily the most fun character to play out of all 3, so I don't know what to think about that. It's a missed opportunity if I've ever seen one. And speaking of missed opportunities, let's talk about the guns in Nier Automata. They are genuinely awful. I don't understand why they did this. I mean, the thing about the machine gun is that it's objectively worse than the laser. Just like the missiles are also objectively worse than lasers. I mean, the missiles don't have any blowback, nor does the machine gun have any stun values on the hit, so you can't juggle anybody in the air, so why would you ever use it? I mean, the laser just does more damage, so just hold down the shoot button and then you just have damage. I can see why they did this with the gun, since, I mean, first of all, the game is not supposed to be as action-oriented as the rest of the Platinum games, and I can see why they made the machine gun such a poor weapon to use, because they remove the lockdown options on hard and very hard, so there's no really point in stunning when you can't even automatically aim at everything. Which, why did they even do that in the first place? Why did they take down your lock-on options when you could have just added moves that go along with your lock-on options, like in Bayonetta or Devil May Cry or Wonderful 101? It just seemed like a really poor design choice to take out the lock-on options after you get onto hard or very hard. It seems like they did it just to make the game harder rather than make the game more fun. You shouldn't do that when you're making a game. You shouldn't compromise fun for difficulty. It's just artificial. Much like the very hard difficulty setting in Nier Automata. The very hard difficulty in Nier Automata it's garbage. Why do they do this? I mean, the thing in most other good action games like Bayonetta or Devil May Cry 3 or 4 is that the most fun and rewarding parts in the game are usually done on the hardest difficulty. They're balanced to where the enemy has slightly more health, do more damage, and the main appeal to the difficulty is that they're more aggressive and have more move sets. And so it's a lot of fun to kind of mess around since you have less health, but you still have a little bit. You're not going to die in one hit like you do in Nier Automata. Especially when you have such terribly designed bosses like that laser worm boss fight. Oh my god. Doing that boss on very hard was probably the most frustrating thing I've ever done. I mean, I did it, but it was horrible. I mean, how many lasers are on screen at once? How many projectiles are flying at you and you have to dodge them? And it's baffling how terrible that was. Why did they put this boss fight in here? Why did they make this difficulty so artificially difficult? It's not even close to anything good. It's not, how do I put this? It's not fun is the main thing. It's not you outwitting the game. It's you just using Berserker mode in order to kill everything as quickly as possible in order to get all the projectiles out of the way. That's not good game design. That's not me parrying through enemy attacks and recognizing their patterns and then pulling off a sick combo in order to kill the enemy. It's not good action game fun. It's genuinely awful. Like, I would honestly expect this crap from like an MMO. It's not me screwing around with game physics and game mechanics in order to do something really goofy and exciting. It's just not what probably most people would want most people want to have fun with the game. Most people just want to enjoy the experience, but it's near impossible to enjoy a game when there's lasers that can kill you in one hit flying around and can even take you off guard, where like you'll dodge something and then it's like, oh yeah, I did, and then immediately get shot by something off screen, which is another weird issue because I think in Devil May Cry 3, I think the rule was if you can't see it on camera, then the enemy can't attack you. But here in Nier Automata, it seems like they didn't even take any design principles from other good action games and applied it here. I mean, because there were moments where attacks off screen were killing me, which is not something that should happen in a Platinum game after all the previous examples of good things that they've done in other games, as well as things that they should have taken note of from games like Devil May Cry 3 and 4. Yeah, because I think one of the things that Hideki Kamiya did mention when he was making Bayonetta 1 was that he took notes while playing Devil May Cry 4, so it's weird that he also didn't play Devil May Cry 3, since I think that's personally the better game, but anyway. And no, it's weird that they didn't implement stuff from those games as well. Okay, now on to my last and final complaint. My final complaint would be the lack of a ranking system. Now, usually in a Platinum game, whether it's Transformers Devastators or Korra, or yeah, even in the lesser of the Platinum games, they usually have some sort of way to reward you for doing really well with the game mechanics. And yet, that's not a thing in Nier Automata. You don't get rewarded for learning all the game mechanics, which incentivizes the player to just be as cheap as humanly possible, to shoot your guns, stay away, and then just taunt the enemies, and then just kill everything as quickly as humanly possible. This is not good game design. This is so not Platinum that it hurts. It physically hurts to think about. I mean, one of the things that they could have done with the ranking system is to make it so if you get like an S rank or an A rank, you get a higher tier of materials, because one of the most annoying things in the game was trying to collect materials for your weapons. It was horrible. Well, it was even worse in the first Nier, but they could have really improved the whole gathering materials for weapons thing by just allowing you to get better rewards if you did really well, if you dodged everything, if you didn't take any damage, if you did larger combos. I mean, I'm sure there's better ways. I'm not a game designer, but there could have been ways to incentivize the player and really make the game more enjoyable, because oh my gosh, the whole game could have been streamlined to where if I did well, learned everything, then I get rewarded. Everyone wins, since all the game's mechanics that the developers put so much time and effort into aren't going to waste, since they're all going to be used. It adds replayability, and also the player gets rewarded for being knowledgeable, and thus reduces the amount of time taken to get materials, since it is a huge part of the game, since you want to figure out all the lore, and in order to do so you need to gather materials. So it could have all just been wonderfully streamlined, but that didn't happen. Now let's get into the ways that the game could be improved. I think the first and foremost thing that needs to be improved would be 9S. I mean, he's just so bad that it makes all the other characters look just amazing in comparison. So here's how I'd fix him. In order to decide what I would do with this character, I played several action games, including Devil May Cry. There's actually a good mechanic in the game, and that's Doppelganger. And in order to improve 9S, I think I would put that mechanic into the game. Okay, so how Doppelganger works is you press L3 and R3 at the same time in order to summon the Doppelganger. And what you can do afterwards is switch the modes from Angel mode to Devil mode, and then you can also make it so that the attacks are delayed by pressing down on the D-pad. I think this is actually not necessary overall. I mean, it would certainly be useful, but I mean, first of all, there is no Angel or Devil mode, and thank God that they're not in there, since it only adds another button that you need to press. I like generally how streamlined Nier Automata is, but there are definitely improvements that need to be made. So how I would apply Doppelganger to Nier Automata is make it so that when you hack a enemy, you instead like have them as like a support character, where when you attack, they attack, and because in the game, each robot has like a different combo string, so if you just made it so that you can use said combo strings to stun the enemy or launch them into the air or send them backwards, I think you would suddenly have a lot more interesting things to be able to do with remote control. Also, I would change self-destruct so that instead of just doing damage, I would add a function to it, like either making the enemy go upwards or going forward. Not sure which one I'd prefer more, since there's a lot that you can do with either of those, but either way, adding a function to an attack like that would just make it better in general. Also, I would probably make it so that hacking is done when the enemy reaches half health, since I would want the player to first have to struggle being as weak as 9S is, and then finally being able to unlock it after a bit of effort. It would just overall make combat feel more rewarding. I don't know, I think one of these, or really anything, would be better than how it currently is in the game. Another addendum I like to make is the pod programs. Now, I'm looking at a list of them, and I don't honestly remember using most of them. I mean, the hammer could be useful, the laser could be useful, the swords were useful, gravity could be useful. I mean, it's not amazing, but slow is something. That was a pretty fun thing to use, kind of. But they were implemented so poorly that I rarely even used them, with an exception being missile. I mean, laser could be used as a way to get an enemy to the wall. Hammer, I'd usually use that as a way to slam either the opponent into the wall, much like the laser, or I would use it as a way to, well, normally it's just an AoE attack anyway, so it's not even that great. I'd rather just use a laser in a combo, because it can be aimed as well as serve as a combo ender or a way to move your opponent around. I don't even remember using Mirage at any point. I think spears could potentially be used in a combo. I'll probably try it out and see if it can be, but I can't see it being really that useful since it only goes so high. Like, it's not something that I could then do a combo, then launch them up, and then the enemies would then be hit by the spear as it goes up as well. Like, I can't use it like that. Maybe I could launch an opponent forward and then use it. P shield, useless. M shield, useless. A wave, don't even remember using. Wire, oh god, wire. Man, they could have really implemented that a lot better. The thing with wire is that 1, it's not cancelable, 2, it's slow, and 3, there's no attack that comes with it. It's not Devil May Cry 4's Stinger ability. It's definitely not Million Stabs, that's for sure. It's useless. You can't even cancel it with self-destruct, so the only thing it's good for, especially on very hard, is just getting hit and then killing you, because you can't do anything with it. Decoy is also not very useful. I mean, if it had some other mechanic other than just to get the enemies away from you, then it might be more viable, but this is not worth it. Slow, that could be potentially something. I mean, if you didn't have bullet time on you, then you could just throw that down in order to continue a combo with an airborne enemy. Like, if it slowed down the speed of the enemy going up in the air as well. I'll have to test that out. If it's successful, a video of it will be playing on screen as I speak. And then the next is repair. I don't really need a heal. Bomb, no, not something that I've ever used. I mean, you can throw the bombs down and then they explode. They don't have an interesting mechanic to them. It's just more AoE damage. And then the next one would have been interesting if it was implemented differently. The way I would have done gravity is instead of having the gravity bomb on the ground, what I would instead do is make it so that the gravity ability was in the air, so you could prolong the enemy's time in the air. Since one of the problems in the game is that you can't keep your opponent in the air for very long other than by either using the dash attack, your launcher with the heavy weapon, missile, or by using a move that's bugged with the self-destruct cancel. But there aren't very many ways to keep yourself and the opponent in the air, and I think one of the ways to solve that would be to add gravity as a air projectile that it sucks everything up into the air, allowing you to have a bit more time to position yourself or do all sorts of other things. Vault is pretty useless. I mean, it does damage over time, but it's not like it stuns the enemy whether on the ground or in the air, so it's not useful in any way. Yeah, the way to fix it would be to either make it so it launches the enemy, or make it so that it's a timed attack where every second or so it'll do stun damage and allows you to get in more attacks. Preferably it should stun in the air and on the ground, but it'd still be more useful either way. I would just prefer it to be both on the ground and in the air, rather than some crappy attack that only does damage over time. It's an attack that should have more utility than it does. Then we have Scanner, which, I mean, it's more used for story purposes and finding hidden items. It doesn't have any utility at all. And then the last one is Missile. Now, I actually quite like Missile. It's, I wish it had a bit more freedom like the dash does. And I also wish it went a bit further, since enemies can be so far apart since some of the areas are so large, but I like it quite a bit. What you can do with it is that you can hit somebody right when they're doing the bounce recovery animation, and it'll actually knock them further backwards. It's a good move to use. I wish that Missile and the Wire ability were put together into one single pod program rather than how it is. It would be so much more useful if it had lock on, or alternatively also what you could do is make Wire different. So you could take some of the things that Wire has, like being able to attach to a single enemy and then go forward, and then add that to Missile, and then make it so instead Wire does something like pulls weaker enemies towards you. I think that would be much more interesting use of those two pod programs than what's in the game currently. Another thing I'd probably do is just remove the P shield and the M shield entirely. Instead, what I would do is put all those resources to make those shields into making a interesting thing I just came up with. Instead of having it so that you have a simple barrier around you, why didn't they let you have the ability to do something like have a giant shield appear right in front of you in which you can bounce enemies off of? I think that would be a lot of fun. And it could also protect you from projectiles as well. And then you have a giant shield that you could use as a platform or a way to elongate combos that you can create. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Okay, so final thoughts. My final thoughts would be that remove the leveling system, give the enemies more health, fix the damage values and the difficulty, because I don't want to be dying in one hit on the hardest difficulty. Give the player some leniency, please. Make it so that they can be stunned more often. Fix 9S, because god is he garbage. I mean, I didn't even mention that even his startups for all his moves are just god-awful. Differentiate A2 and 2B a bit more as far as playstyles go, and there's a bit of a trade-off between the two. A2 has that wonderful dash, and 9S has more moves to play with, but you could probably just put those two characters together and just have a much better character. So I'd probably differentiate them a bit more than just those two specific things. And give the player more combos to mess around with. I think that is one of the most important things that need to be addressed. I think this game is really wonderful. I've played it through several times and I've enjoyed it every single time, but I think there's also things that need to be improved, like I've just stated. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. You can also leave comments. I'm not opposed to that. I won't delete any of your comments, even if they're terrible. Well, unless it's spam, maybe. But even then, I'd probably still leave it up, because I'm all for freedom of speech. Say whatever you want, and I'll hopefully be able to talk to you in the comments. Also, if you can tell me what I did wrong in this video, I'd be very much willing to hear it out. Since I'm new to this whole video making thing, I apologize if it's terrible. But please hang with me, I'm sure to improve in the future. I'd like to give a very special thanks to CM Devils, Miss Jazz Defunk, and to E::R. I'd like to give a really big thanks to CM Devils for teaching me how to play this game. I mean, without him, I wouldn't have been able to make this video, so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, CM Devils. I'd also like to give a thanks to Miss Jazz Defunk for her wonderful commission. She did a really great job, and I very much appreciate it. I'd also like to thank E::R for this particular effect in the video. Okay guys, that's it. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you guys have a wonderful New Year's.